feeling. But what you got, you never hurt no one. Lord, you got to kill off the one youth man. But what you got, you never hurt no one. Lord, you got to kill off the one youth man. He say now girls and guns and girls, come together like the diamond and pearl. 1D1, rule the world. Trying to tell me you're no ordinary girl. If there's a woman, would you like to come quick? I said now.
Welcome back to The Approach. Got San Diego's own Slightly Stupid bringing us on in there today on a Monday night. Drew, how are you living, young man?
I'm great. I wasn't necessarily expecting that intro, so good vibes. I appreciate that. And beautiful San Diego. If no one's been, it's a wonderful place. So I'm looking forward to getting into this. This seems like that first big week, right? Big time field, full field. I'm excited about it, man.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I snuck that video on you. I don't know if all that is legal because this is going on YouTube too. So I guess I got to say that I don't own any of that or whatever. Okay. So hopefully,
well, you just said it.
Yeah, perfect. Sweep that under the rug. Well, hey, let's just talk real quick. I'm glad that Lakina, we're gone. The Amex is gone. But shout out to Hudson Swafford. If you had a ticket on him, great job, great call. But I don't know, just that tournament fits the winner, I think. I mean, what do you think about Hudson and the Amex?
Yeah, I mean, good for Hudson Swafford. It's funny, you're kind of looking at the leaderboard come Sunday afternoon. Lots of guys that haven't won a lot, right? And so at that point, it was like it's kind of anybody's tournament. When, Cantlay got the first 2 days, right? It seemed like this was probably going to be a Patrick Cantlay deal, and then he goes out and shoots 72 on Saturday and kind of wipes out his chances. So yeah, if you look at those guys at the top of the leaderboard, it was kind of anybody's show. Not a whole lot of win equity there per se. But good for Hudson Swafford. I mean, 64 on Sunday got it done. Whatever you think about the tournament, the setup, I know John Rahm had choice words for it. Other people have kind of said as much, but yeah, man. So good for Hudson Swafford. He seems like an overall good guy. Yeah,
and talk about a horse for course. That 3 of Hudson Swafford wins, 2 of which came at the American Express. So good for him. Yeah, we'll talk about him as we get into Torrey here shortly. But I think I saw something where the optimal lineup had a couple thousand left on the table because I think winning lineups in GPPs had either Rahm or Cantlay, but gosh, the door was open for them if you faded them. Like Sung Jae kind of tried to sneak up there on Sunday, but yeah, they didn't blow the field away. They didn't finish top 5. You could have gone Varner, Swafford, whatever, and so it's pretty wild. But we're going to dive into that. We're going to do something a little differently tonight, because we got some horses in the field that we haven't really seen in a while, or we've only seen once this year, being at Kapalua. We're just going to offer a little bit of like a news blurb, a little inside to get caught up on where some of these thoroughbreds are heading into Torrey. Because Drew, you're right that this is the first big one of the year, and it's bigger than most. And we have like a guy like JT, who hasn't played here in a while. So on that number, why don't you just tell us a little bit about JT and how he's coming into the field or the tournament this week?
So that's a good point. So JT, not one that plays the Farmers, right? That's just an event that is not on his calendar. Of course, we had the U.S. Open here last year. The one thing that it's hard to take away is it's played at a completely different time of year. But really, for Justin Thomas, statistically, everything's there besides the putter. The putter's just been really, really bad. The one thing that stands out a little bit when you look at this course and this week is how many strokes he gained on the greens the last time around here at the U.S. Open, which I think one of the things they do is narrow the fairways and kind of grow up the rough. So one thing that's going to be somewhat consistent is what they're done on, what's being done on the greens. But for a guy with 1 top 10 last year, or 1 win and 8 top 10s, it's just, for me, it's hard to win multiple times a year. And the way his putter was going, really the last 7 or 8 tournaments of the year, it just wasn't there, right? And so I think that that's something that he's going to shore up. But yeah, to come into this week and look at it, I mean, to be coming off gaining 8.5 strokes at the U.S. Open here, which is incredible in itself if you think about a major championship and what he did on the greens here. So his game, ball striking's always kind of in form. It really comes down to the putter, and now we head to the POA. So I mean, I expected probably a decent week out of him this week. Again, you don't want to read too much into the U.S. Open just because it was, a different time of year, but you got to like JT. Like, if I were to ask you right now, would you take the over under on JT at like 2.5 wins this year, which is a hell of a year?
Yeah, I got like I'm gonna have to take the under. Just on 3 wins is a lot to ask.
It's a lot, man.
It is, but I like the caddy switch up to Bones. I think that's only going to help him. And you brought up some great point on his putting struggles toward the end of the last year. Kind of forgotten all about that, or maybe I just blocked it out of my mind because I was on JT a lot. But it brings up a great point, because when you have a great field like this, and it is good for an average tour event, it gets harder maybe though to condense your lineup, because the margins are much smaller than within a John Rahm to a JT, even though John better course history, whatever. But it's much smaller than, let's just say you go down to the 7K range and Johnny Vegas to a Kevin Strudelman. That
Right.
line may not be as thin. So when you get more thoroughbreds in the field here, it makes it a little tricky. So before we get to your next guy, because that was great on JT, the guy I'm kind of excited that I want to talk about, and we'll go back and forth with our guys here, but is DJ. We haven't seen DJ in a long time. A guy who didn't win last year, who wasn't at Kapalua. So we might be looking at the card or looking at the DK board and thinking, gosh, well, what the hell do we do with DJ? Because last time we saw him was at the CJ Cup. Shot a 45. I mean, finished 45th. Didn't really play that well tee to green. Only metric he gained, strokes gained, was on the greens. Didn't play well at the Tour Championship. Hasn't gained strokes on approach since the St. Jude, and so he's a horse for course there. So really, it's not current form, because that was last year. But DJ's didn't have a good or solid end of the year and didn't play well at the CJ Cup. But one thing I thought was interesting, this course should fit DJ, has some kind of pretty solid results here. But I looked at DJ off a layoff, and so I'm giving that 4 weeks or more. And so in 2021, I think he finished 8th at the Genesis. He played Kapalua before that. That was over a month. In 2020, he had just about a month around, maybe a week or two more, finished 2nd at the Houston Open. Then a couple years ago, had a 32 at the AT&T Pebble Beach, had a 4th at the Tournament of Champions a few years ago. After another month and a half off, finished 2nd at AT&T. So point being is that DJ, over the course of his career, we don't know what form he's in, but actually has done pretty well off a layoff. And so a layoff is a couple weeks. So he definitely hasn't played in a while. But if you're concerned and if he's low owned, DJ actually does do well off a layoff. What do you think?
Yeah, super wild card. It's so weird to talk about DJ in that sense, and you hit it kind of on the head there at the last thing you said, that the last time that he gained strokes was actually on the greens, which is not what DJ does. And he just hasn't played a lot. Even with the layoff, before the layoff, he hadn't played a lot. I look back to Whistling Straits where he just dominated, right? And so we know DJ is that capable player. I also think that him not winning last year and kind of the way he played is kind of a chip on his shoulder. And I do expect big things out of him. And then, you walk into a giant ballpark, which you would think that suits his nice little cut very nicely. I think that he's a guy that potentially will go low owned because we haven't seen him a lot, or when we have seen him, the form hasn't necessarily been there. And it's been sporadic play, really. So he is the most fascinating guy, not only for this week, but just this year in general. I think I would expect a couple wins from DJ, and I think that last year is more of the outlier than it's going to become the norm moving forward. The talent's just there, right? And it's just sometimes it's such a thin slope with these guys, right? If you get one thing going the wrong way, it's just hard to compete over 4 days. So he's a very interesting player, not only this week but moving forward.
Yeah, I like. I don't know if I'll get to him. I want to bet on, but not his numbers not great. Maybe more of a DFS play. Also putts well on POA. POA is his best putting surface. All right, next dude, who you got? Who's one of your guys you're talking to that we maybe only seen a little bit of?
Yeah, so I'll hit on Daniel Berger, and it's funny because there's definitely some similarities between Justin Thomas and kind of the way his year went as to Daniel Berger. So if you look at Daniel Berger, his last 4 events, he has lost strokes on the greens in every single one of them.
Wow.
But ball striking wise, it's been ridiculous, right? I mean, he's gone 10 strokes gained, 6 strokes gained, 7 strokes gained in approach alone. So it's pretty impressive what the ball striking numbers were. I think the Ryder Cup, again, I know I hinted on that a little bit with DJ, but that's a good experience for a young player like him. He doesn't do anything flashy, right? Like there's not anything that to his game that's flashy. But if you break it down and look at kind of the finishes he's had, he had 7 top 10s and in what a win last year. So and then he won on Pebble. We're on the West Coast again. So we're looking at to this week. I do think there's opportunity there. I hit on the terrible putting statistics. He actually gained almost true strokes on the greens at the US Open, back in June. So again, I think that there's going to be some similarities with the greens. The greens are the same. It's kind of all the other external factors that kind of weigh in is compared to the Farmers to a US Open. But these two guys are very similar. They check every box you want balls, or basically anything outside on the greens. And we know that Daniel Berger can be a streaky putter. So he's a guy that I really like. And he just flies under the radar. Like if you don't sit back and actually look at his body of work over the last 12 months, you wouldn't even think about him being kind of the player he's at. He's the under talked about kind of top end talent that we have on the tour. So again, with him and JT, if he just gets it back to average on the greens with the way he hits the golf ball, I mean, he's a problem. And this week, the distance, all that's not necessarily a factor because he's sneaky long as well. So it's again, I like to see these guys potentially turn around on the greens as compared to fix the game like we talk about a lot. But for him losing 5 straight rounds on the greens is pretty incredible, especially with a 5th and an 11th in those appearances.
Good point. So maybe in his Poa is his best putting surface as well. Maybe
by far,
a little positive regression with there. Well, real quick in a sentence or two, because our boy Evan asked a great question about course conditions comparative to the U.S. Open versus what we typically see at the Farmers. I would imagine that obviously less difficult, but you're the expert, Drew. What would you say, real quick?
Yeah, definitely less difficult. The one thing, it'll probably play a little bit longer here in January. There's a lot more overseed going on, especially in the rough, where when you're hitting it in June, you're hitting it to where you play the golf course a little bit more firm and fast. They also grow up the rough a lot, and they also tighten the fairways when it comes to the US Open. So you can get the fairways and things running a little faster than you could in the month of January. Month of January, greens will be a little bit more susceptible. However, it does lean to that rough being overseeded, and that Kikuyu it's a sticky grass. And so sometimes it's hard to get out, which you could lean towards the bomb and gouge approach this week just because of that, if that's the route you want to go. But it's kind of the softness of the golf course, I would say, between to January to June.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So just moving on, because we're going to get through some of these guys. The next is kind of a big mystery, and that's Bryson. I don't know what we're going to do with Bryson. First, has played this event twice, 2 missed cuts, I believe. Played terribly at the Century at a course that should suit him. Surprisingly gained on approach, but lost 3.3 off the tee. Bryson usually is near or at the top of every off the tee metric, so that was really frightening to see. But I was reading that he's really setting his sights on Augusta from what I was reading, and he got a new driver that's supposed to really slow down kind of ball speed. So I guess tried to avoid the kind of the big miss, but it's going to be hard. I mean, Bryson has extreme upside. We see it. This is a course for him. But 2 missed cuts. He seems to be, again, this is all narrative based, but seems to be just tinkering with the distance, of a love affair that he has. So he's more concerned about, at least I feel, about getting the yardages or the further yards, the club head speed, whatever. Not so concerned about winning. I feel like it's hard to play him here. I want to. He's maybe a good outright, but just real quick, what do you think of Bryson?
It's always something. So and yeah. I hope that he's honing in everything to win golf tournaments, right? Like Like we did the long drive thing. That's past us now. Now it's time to kind of get laser focused. But he's always tinkering with something. He's always changing a loft or lie, a length of the driver, a different shaft of the driver. He's constantly tinkering. Now, if you look at the golf course itself, he may not have had great success around here, but it should fit him, right? I mean, it's a golf course to where you think that you're going to have somewhat of an advantage being a longer player. It's just it worries me a little bit. And I know guys, and JT said this too. He's trying to learn how to peak at the right times. And that's what these guys at this level are trying to do when it comes to major championships. Having your visions 3 months down the road may be, in his mind, the best way to prepare for the Masters. But again, we've seen how he's talked around the Masters. Oh, I can just hit 9 iron into 13, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like it doesn't always work like that. So you'd like to, with the potential there, these are the years where he needs to start ticking off wins and big wins, because I'm not sure as a body how long he can hold up swinging the golf club as he does. Whether the form's good, the spine angle's good, you just cannot continuously put that amount of speed in your body over and over again and maintain health. So he's just such a wild card all the time, man. And you just don't know like what Bryson you're going to get. And so, yeah, outright market for sure. You could talk me into it, but I'm just not sure DFS wise what percentage I'm okay with playing him, because I just don't know who I'm going to get.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's move on real quick before we get to the board. I think you have two other guys real quick who I think one of them is BK. So talk about BK a little bit.
Yeah, just the numbers are terrible. I mean, it's that simple, right? And we talk all the time. Oh, hey, he's in for the major championships, and I know he played well in some of the majors. But if you look, just to give you, not to bore people with strokes gain data, but if we just filter the last 24 for Brooks, he's over 100th in strokes gained in 3 different categories and almost at 100 in 3 others. So the only thing he's doing well to an extent is playing off the tee. But I mean, it's terrible. He's been awful on the greens. He's been awful approach wise. So when you try to break it down, like there's no singular issue that I can come up with at this point, right? And as far as his year last year, yeah, he won the Waste Management, which is a big time tournament. But you also look back at course history here. So he had a decent U.S. Open. He finished 4th here. He really put on a ball striking clinic around this place in June. But course history wise, he has an MC and he hasn't played here a whole lot, right? And so this is again, and I know I don't want to get off base, but do you think there's a reasoning, whether it be the schedule and how it's unfolding this year, as to why we see more people playing the Farmers? Because if you look at it, some of the top guys that you would think would come to Torrey just haven't consistently come here.
Yeah, well, I think the tour is making them, they have to have a certain amount of new
venues.
Yeah, new venues for it. And I mean, why not choose San Diego? But yeah, I mean, Brooks' U.S. Open finish could be an outlier. And the guy is not great on POA, has played here 3 times as part of the Farmers and has 2 missed cuts. And what I really worry about is the POA surface. I know he'll get the Bermuda on the North Course one day, but the putting surface is going to be different. I mean, you're the expert. You tell me, but I'd imagine different in June than it is in January. Likely more bumpy today. And if you're, everyone's been narrative. You're the POA green and these kind of West Coast California POA is its own different surface.
Yep.
In general, outside of regular POA. So I don't think he's comfortable with it. His back data says he's not comfortable with it. I kind of agree there.
And there's something to it, right? Yeah. Guys play good in California and don't play good in Florida, or vice versa. Even the best players have their preference when it comes to putting surfaces. And he's clearly a Florida guy. He lives in the Jupiter area. So, but you definitely have these horses for these West Coast kind of tracks. And he's just not one of them. And there's just so many different factors going on with Brooks Koepka that it's hard for me to kind of feel like he's going to have a great week here. And again, I kind of throw out what I saw at the U.S. Open to an extent.
Yeah. Well, next guy that we're moving on, and we're almost done before we hit the board, Taylor Gooch, my boy. I cannot wait to talk with him. So for 2 reasons. First reason is last week, I think, and I even sent you, I think we were talking on Twitter, it was a big example of groupthink and confirmation bias. So we know that with Taylor Gooch, how great of a fall swing he had. I mean, 11th at the Shriners, 4th at the Fortinet. Mayakoba 11th, won the RSM. Gooch is a great player, and he did all that through his approach game, killed it. Over 5 3 times in the fall swing on approach. Started kind of tailing off a little bit. Didn't play as well at the Sony and the Century. But what people kind of do is when you have a guy, and he had good course history last week, but when we see a guy who's getting highly touted, and so people can kind of think it's kind of the false shot fallacy that if I see a couple go in, then they're all going to start going in. So people think that certain trend and play will continue, and especially in golf with all the variables is not true. So when people are rostering a guy like Gooch, they see everybody kind of tout him. He was highly owned. He was on everyone's betting boards. And so then confirmation bias kicks in that it's like, yeah, I mean, this makes sure I need to play him. He is going to play well. He is going to do all right. But what we want to do with our golfers is look at it like as if we're buying a stock. And so we got to do our due diligence and say, okay, why should I buy, or maybe why should I sell, and play devil's advocate with yourself a little bit, because humans have a lot of human error, unfortunately, and our bias is one of those. And so one is confirmation bias. So if I like Gooch and I liked him last week, even at a high number, even when I'm going to kind of turn an eye to some of these concerning things I've seen, we don't do that because we get the confirmation bias. So it actually turns our ability away to look at the investment constructively, because Gooch didn't play well again the Century, kind of trending in the opposite way in the ball striking. So I'm going to put a period in that. But now we're going to come back to where we might get him now. Recency bias is then gone. Hopefully there's no confirmation bias. Haven't seen on many people's cards, but coming off the miscut of the American Express is the time to jump back on. Gained 1.5 on approach. But what I'm more pleased with is that he actually lost almost 3.5 around the green. Typically, Gooch is an excellent around the green player. Combined with his course history here, he has a third in 2019. Excellent POA guy. I really like Gooch. It's time to get back on the horse with him. And I'm good. He's going to be on an outright car. He's going to be highly owned in DFS. I like Gooch to rebound. And it turned in a blessing to disguise because we might get an ownership discount on him after that miscut.
We're back, baby.
We're back. We're back on the horse.
Listen, you make a great point with like trying to talk it out like stocks, right? Like we can't fall into trying to buy guys at their highest peak, right? So if Gooch's value was never going to be higher than it was, we've seen the salary wise in DK go way up from what we started at with this thing. We've also seen ownership projections go way up. Everybody, he was the beautiful girl at the dance, right? And then people were trying to buy him at the top, when really, to your point, coming off the miscut last week, I think we got a little bit of this with Sungjae last week, ownership wise, with the week before, and that's why I think you and I both thought Sungjae was probably a good play last week. But yeah, especially in DFS, you can't necessarily buy guys at their peak. You have to get them before we get there, right? And that's kind of like that forecasting is what we're trying to look at. And that's why it's hard when everybody is on a guy, he almost has to be perfect. Like look at Rahm last week, for example, incredible ownership numbers, right? And for him at his salary and that ownership, he essentially had to win, right? For him to be value in your lineup. So yeah, you definitely can't buy it at its peak. We got to get it a little bit prior to that.
Yeah. Well said. All right, let's move to one last guy we talk about before we're going to look at the board, and it's your boy. I know you're excited to talk about this young man coming up.
Yeah. So as you know, and everybody knows, I'm the huge Spieth guy. I think everybody loved the fact that we got to see Spieth in contention, and things kind of turned around. Now, for golf swing wise, he was battling all kinds of things, and not to, I don't want to get too golf swing technical here, but just to put it in perspective, right? So basically from February to July, he was on a absolute tear. Since July, and that basically starts kind of at the Northern Trust, it has been a ball striking disaster. Yeah. I mean, he's essentially stayed above water with his putter, which is what we expect him to do. But man, it's like you look back at Century, lost 4.5 approach He's missing it both ways. Like you see, if you watch golf, you see Spieth kind of rehearse that over the top move. His golf swing gets stuck inside, and the timing and everything has to be perfect. And so it's just something he's still fighting. You can tell right now, and I will pick Spieth blindly at times, but this isn't the time it's going to be. And I know he's had some success around here, 19th at the U.S. Open. But again, at the U.S. Open, he didn't do anything fantastic. And to be honest with you, it's just not been there. The numbers are there on the greens, like I said. But if you look at last 24 for everything else, I mean, 128th in approach in the last 24, 133rd in ball striking. Like, just it's not there right now. You can tell he's going through something. We saw it go from here. It started to come up. And this is just golf, man. When you're fighting stuff in your golf swing, you're going to have ebbs and flows. I just think that this is a time to probably sell Jordan Spieth. And also, he's a guy, and you see it all the time. He's one of, if not the most popular guys on tour, which leads his ownership every single week on DraftKings, whether it's reasonable or not, to be higher. And it's always probably going to be that way just because we know the 2015, 2016 Spieth. But man, right now, everything screams to just back away for a little while and just kind of see how things unfold.
Yeah, I agree. And that well said on the state of Spieth's play. And again, you would know better than anybody. You're the Spieth whisperer. Let's get to the card now. And from a DFS perspective, let's break it down. This is, and let's not try to talk about guys that we just touched on unless like we want to put them on our lineup. But it's surprisingly that JT is only $300 less than Rahm, and very condensed up top. Where I'm likely starting, Hideki, he's not going to gain, 7 strokes on the green again. But man, at Sony, he did play well to tee to green. But I'm going to have some Hideki. It may be a full fade for Rahm for me, depending on the ownership. Yeah, Rahm, amazing course history. We know that. Course fit. I'm just trying to find leverage somewhere because I'm going to scatter a lot at the top, and my highest owned guys are likely going to be like my highest owned guy might be in the 7 or 8K range, and we'll get there. But that'll allow me to spread more up top. But you have to make some stands. Not sure if I'm going to get the JT, but Decky, DJ, I think Xander has a great opportunity to get that monkey off his back that says, hey, I can't win in my hometown. But I like you. I really like Berger, and I'm so interested to see what his ownership might be, because if it's 15 to 18%, he might be my highest owned guy in this range. So I also like Scotty. Want to throw him out there. I like how he maybe kind of knocked the rust off last week, like Scotty this week. In the 9K and above, where are you maybe looking at to start your lineups?
So I think you made a good point too. So look at kind of where Berger's set right now, kind of sandwiched between Xander and Bryson. And I know Bryson's going to be a sexy pick just based off of people just look at and say, hey, the distance of this golf course is 7,700 yards. Hey, let's go with the guy that hits it the furthest. And Xander with the hometown narrative, I'm very weary of Xander. I just don't. I don't know. I can't get the right read on him. I know he talks about Berger, but I think Berger is a great starting spot. But yeah, again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it all the way up to Rahm and JT, just because I see so much value here at 9 and 8K that if we start it with a guy like you said, Scotty Scheffler, for example, we're at 9,500, and now we can start building from there. Is where you want to go pay the money for Jon Rahm, and people will because of the U.S. Open and his win here in 2017. And I get it, but I think the way to start is probably right there at Berger, and you could go with a guy like Sam Burns, who potentially will be highly owned. But I'm probably staying away from the top of the board. If I were to pick a person, it would be Hideki, just because he's just, I mean, again, if he's just average on the greens, he's a problem anywhere, any course. So I'm with you on that, man.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, and you're right. And so one thing I think is really interesting is the bottom of the 9K range. What's going to happen? And I love your Sungjae call. I think Sungjae is going to continue to improve. He's going to have another top 10. But Tony Finau is so interesting. Kind of was one of my big pivots last week. Finished 40th at the Amex. Didn't play that bad. 2.5 on approach, 1.7 on the green. One really interesting piece with Tony, though. In 21 measured rounds at Torrey on the South Course, Tony Finau actually ranks second in strokes gains total and second in DK points and first on approach at Torrey. Oh, excuse me. I was looking at the guy before. He ranks second total and second in DK points, ranks 35 in on approach. But still, second in strokes gained total, Tony Finau in 21 measured rounds at Torrey. That surprised me. He may still be another good pivot. Another guy just above him, I'm worried that the recency bias will kind of kick on. I was big on Willie Z last week, had an outright on him. Finished, was in contention come Sunday. Willie Z was surprising. He's only had 4 measured rounds at the South Course at Torrey outside the U.S. Open, I believe. So take it with a grain of salt. But 16th in strokes gained total. What people are going to do with him, Finau, and Leishman is going to be really interesting. So can't wait to see what ownership says on those 3 guys. What do you think?
Yeah, Zalatoris is the interesting one, right? And I think that based off us talking, we can kind of, for me, I'm eliminating Brooks, I'm eliminating Spieth. Sungjae, again, is a guy that I'm into playing. I'm all in on Tony Finau. I had so much Finau last week. It was incredible, right? And it didn't necessarily go so well because he made a bunch of others. But I think his game, to your point, fits this golf course fantastic. Will Zalatoris is interesting. So I was reading Will Zalatoris put in a longer driver, and he was hitting it 15 or 16 yards longer. He actually was second in driving distance last week. Now, yeah, that sounds great going into this week. But to your point, yeah, Will Zalatoris, we got at a bargain last week as compared to this week. I think we just don't get him at that bargain. I will definitely monitor that ownership percentage because I wouldn't mind playing him, but there's definitely a cutoff for me. But the interesting one's Mark Leishman. That's the interesting one to me because I just don't know, to your point, with Gooch and Finau kind of bordering where he is, and we don't typically get huge Leishman numbers as far as project or ownership wise. He's the interesting one for me, and I think if you're in on him and you play him at a high percentage, he has a good week. That's giving you quite a bit of value based off of kind of where he sits on this board.
Yeah, and I agree. Leishman is so interesting. Yeah, fun story. I was on him when he won here a few years ago, the day actually Kobe died, I think it was. So, RIP, Kobe. But Leishman came in trending that well, very well that week, especially tee to green. Not so much this week, but everything I've been hearing and just kind of reading is that Leishman's like in love with this game right now. So maybe take that with a grain of salt. But I can't wait to talk about this AK range. There's 2 guys that I really like, one of which I'll get to in a second. But the first guy is, where is the Matthew Wolff love? Everybody posted their cards. Not everybody. A lot of people posted their cards earlier today. Didn't see any Wolff when he was on everyone's card last week.
It didn't make sense to me. This week makes the sense. This week makes the sense.
I think I didn't. How Matthew Wolff got the 3rd highest owned guy in DK last week, I will not understand. Yeah, he had a pretty good fall swing, but again, had a longer layoff. And we talk about things can change week to week with some of these golfers, especially a guy like Wolff, who kind of how streaky he is. I did not understand the love for him last week. But no, outright betting, we know his upside. I'm more talking about DFS.
Right.
But this is the time to put him in DFS and your outright. He's going to be one of my outrights, a much better course fit. We saw what he did at the U.S. Open. Kind of killed it tee to green the first 2 days. Decent course history, especially at the U.S. Open. Get back on Matthew Wolff. And the other guy I tweeted out last night is this is Maverick McNeely season. I haven't played much of Mav ever, really. And I've been waiting because he's been trending really nicely. Kind of reminds me, if people were following me, that before we had the show, of Max Homa's run. When it kind of reminds me of that when he kind of peaked at Riv. But I really, especially when he gets home into Pebble Beach next week, really look out for him. But I like Mav a lot this week. Excellent POA guy. Excellent on the Cali POA. In 7 measured rounds at Torrey, ranks 15th tee to green, ranks 23rd off the tee, and trending very nice. One thing I really like about this week is we finally get to do some rolling reports. We finally get to see some of the trends, and Maverick McNeely is trending in the top 10 in a few of these ball striking metrics. Everything says play him. I don't know how highly owned he's going to be because he's sandwiched between kind of Homas right there, Rose, who has excellent course history, but love Maverick McNeely. And just to throw it out there, that says a lot because I'm usually not a Mav guy. But well, who are you guys that you're looking at in the 8K range, or maybe what do you think about those?
Yeah, to touch on I do love the McNeely play, and I think that I think some people will be on Maverick McNeely, but this week seems to be a great setup for him. I also think a guy that just looking at the board in this range that's going to be extremely high owned. And I know Evan, just his last comment was if you'd be at north of 15%. I think Max Homa does end up north of 15%. California kid, he has win equity. I think he's a name that people like to play. So when I'm looking at this, leaves me Bez or Patrick Reed. Now, Bazudenhout had a solid week last week, right? The Patrick Reed, he had a fine week, I guess. It wasn't solid.
Oh yeah, no, he had a good Friday, he had a good Thursday, and a tough Sunday. I think it was.
But so when you look at Patrick Reed right now, and just the stats aren't there. The one thing I will fall back on though is how well he did play at the U.S. Open last year. So top 20 there. I think the ownership percentage is low. I am a very hesitant Patrick Reed guy, especially in my DFS lineups. But I think he will be low owned. I think he's kind of the strange one of this 8K group besides Ryan Palmer. I think Ryan Palmer will probably come in definitely the lowest ownership of this group. But yeah, I'm going to roll with Patrick Reed in this. I would take Corey Connors. I like a lot what Corey Connors does. I just don't know if this is the great course fit for Corey Connors. He hasn't had a lot of success around here. And so I'm in with you on Wolf and Patrick Reed. I will take, and yeah, I like the Mav McNeely play as well. I'm going to stay away from Max Homa, and we know that you're going to be in the Taylor Gooch category as well this week.
Yeah. Speaking of Palmer, I can't believe that he was in the 8K range. Very surprising, but it makes sense because his ball striking numbers at Torrey are kind of surprising. In 17 measured rounds, he ranks first in ball striking, third on approach. So 17th in DK points. I mean, gosh, that's good for Ryan Palmer. Kind of played all right at Sony. And look out for him. Justin Rose, really kind of like Justin Rose again. I was on him last week. Here's my hot take of going in now to the below 8K range is that Keegan is in contention at some point over the weekend. Really like what I saw from Keegan last week. We know what we're going to get with him with the putter. We know that. But if he can ball strike this course to death, and I say to death, that just keeps him in the top 10 or 15. Speaking of love at Torrey, is 10th in strokes gained total, is 6th tee to green, 4th in ball striking. Like Keegan this week. The other guy in the 7K range that I just want to touch on is Brandt Snedeker. Kind of bummed that Brandt's been popping up on the kind of leaderboards lately. I've been on him each of the last 3 weeks, starting at Sony, and was hoping he'd fly under the radar this week. I don't think we're going to get him underneath the radar. Brandt Snedeker leads the field in putting on POA surface. Has great course history here. Speaking of his strokes gained at Torrey, he's played here a bunch. Has 41 measured rounds, one of the most in the field. First in strokes gained total, first in strokes gained puttings, 12th in DK points, 18th tee to green. Snedeker, we've always seen him trending. He's playing back, maybe just the form he used to be in, 7,400. Worry he's going to be highly owned, though. But the good thing is Aaron Wise is right above him, and everybody loves to play Aaron Wise. Please let me save you from Aaron Wise this week. Don't play him.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, like, when I'm looking at this 7K range, I'm still not there. You've been all over the Justin Rose wagon, and you've been right to an extent, right? And I'm just not there with Justin Rose, and that's probably a me problem more than anything else. So I'll get that out of the way. Guys that I'm going to just kind of off the top eliminate is Tom Hoagie, who I know had a fantastic week last week. I think he's ownership-wise is going to be up there. Aaron Wise, I'll also eliminate. As much as this pains me to say, I'm going to play Jason Day. And the guy he's had success around here. He had a lot of good things going last week, and then he ended up making a triple and kind of shooting his way out of it. I think his game slowly started to come back around. The thing is with Jason Day is just his body, right? Is he able to hold up and practice a lot? But Jason Day is a guy that I'll go to. I do like the call with Snedeker. I mean, hell, Snedeker always seems to play well on the West Coast. And you mentioned how good he is on POA. Not only here, you go down to roll the Pebble. He's had a lot of success as well. But I will go back to Johnny Vegas this week, thinking I might get him on a little bit of an ownership discount. I know everybody was high on him last week. Hey, I mean, talk about a guy that's fantastic, typically tee to green, at least off the tee. A guy, his putting's just not very good. But again, around this golf course, I think there's value, especially at 7,400 for him.
Yeah.
And again, I think after last week and what we saw, that he has the opportunity to have a bounce back. I know he had a decent week at the U.S. Open, just lost. I mean, hell, I'm looking at it now. At the U.S. Open, lost almost a 7 strokes on the greens. That's just not going to get it done. But ball striking wise, it's there, right? So he's one of those flyer guys I'm taking. And I usually, he is typically one of those high owned guys that randomly in those lower ends. But I think, after the what we saw last week, which ended up being a miscut at the Amex, where he just didn't do anything well, I will go with Johnny Vegas there at 74.
Nice. Well, what are we doing with our boy Phil? I think we're both on him last week. Phil, good course history.
Yeah.
And I keep remembering of Phil, and I'm surprised Paul Casey's not in this field, because Paul Casey has some pretty good course history here. But do you remember when Phil and Paul were battling down the stretch, and it was Sunday? I mean, I think there was like the marine layer cloud, like there was a delay, and Phil tried to get Casey, talk him into playing into the dark to finish on 18th. But I like Phil, and I might go back to the well. I know he played terrible last week, but we know how streaky Phil is. I don't hold any weight into that. Phil, surprisingly, again, he's almost like Snedeker, played this tournament, one of the most. But it's so surprised that he ranked second on approach here. That
doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't. And so, I may jump back into Phil, but we're getting into now the 6K range because we're running low on time. And first, I'll say this. I usually love the 6K range, but this is not the tournament to kind of go dumpster diving to way down the 6K. I'll probably cap it at 6,700, and that's solely because there's not a lot of names I like before that. Because when we have these great tournaments, it's not the Amex. You're not going to have a leaderboard come Sunday with all these guys at triple digits to win. The
talent to the top here.
That's right. And so Adam Long, his name is going to come. You'll hear him a lot. So let me kind of share a few names you might not hear a lot this week. JJ Spawn, like him a whole lot. Played well last week, and I think it was on Saturday. Had a very good round going. Finished 25th last week. JJ Spawn's played here 11 rounds here, 20th in strokes gained total. Very, very good for a guy at 6,900 like JJ. Taylor Pendrith hasn't played here, but we know he's a big hitter, the Canadian. You'll hear Bramlett's name a lot, and that makes sense. He's trending some of the best. Some people have been on him, for the last couple of weeks. But Bramlett reminds me of, who's the guy that can just ball strike people to death, but it can't putt? Well, I'm losing inning. But you know him. Who's the? Help me out here. I'll give you mad props if you can think of this name. He's got dark hair. He's thin. He kills it. Tee to green and approach.
Matthew Neesmith?
No, if you're close though.
Also, yes, I was gonna say he fits the MO to an extent, right?
You're close, but he's terrible putting. And I'm trying to Kyle Stanley. That's
okay. Yeah.
So not Duffner. Bramlett has always had some pretty decent tee to green numbers, especially off the tee, can crush it. It's a lot better recently, so he is trending really nicely. But he just reminds me of a little bit better Kyle Stanley. So, but I'm going to include him in the pool just because he's trending so well. Henrik Norlander really like, and last guy Scott Stallings. Actually, I lied. Sepp Straka. I am going to go down there. So a lot of guys really like JJ Spawn the most out of that range. Adam Long too, but JJ might be my favorite. Who are you liking maybe in the sicko range?
Yeah, I got a couple guys that you didn't mention, and I've kind of been on this player quite a bit, but Adam Svensson, I feel like this course, with the way the guy hits his irons, if you break down this golf course, there's a lot of healthy second shots with the irons, right? So we're looking from that 175 to 200 range. He's 14th in strokes gained approach. I like him a lot at 6,900. I'm going to go back to Grayson Sigg. I know he had a nice week last week. He's an under the radar player at 6,800. He's usually pretty solid off the tee. And then the third guy that I'll go with is Davis Riley, who also had a good week last week. And I think so a lot of these stats, when you're looking at these younger guys, KFT guys, you can't read a whole lot into it because there's not a big enough sample size when we're talking about these strokes gain data. So a lot of people just look at, okay, things aren't great. But if you look at the trends, Davis Riley's really playing good golf at 6,800. Between him, Sigg, and Adam Svensson, those are kind of the three guys that I'm liking down in this range. Wanted to get to the Harry Higgs, but I just can't do it.
Nice. Well, that's a great read on it. I think I like where our head's at. I feel good about this week. And I'll say, again, I'm going to be out at Torrey on Thursday.
Yeah,
Friday,
boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground. So super excited. So if there's any listeners out there want to grab a beer, watch some golf, let me know. I would love to, even just say hello for a minute or two, because a great community here. So looking forward to that. Going to be fun. And might just close us out going back to the Slightly Stupid video. What do you say, Drew?
Yes, let's do it, man. And hey, have a wonderful time. You said you're going Saturday?
I'm going Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Oh, beautiful, man. We'll enjoy it, brother. And yeah, we'll get out of here on a positive vibe note.
All right, guys. One love.
To kill off the one youth man. But I want you ganja never hurt no one. Thought you got to kill off the one youth man. He say now girls and guns and girls come together like the diamond and pearl. 1D1